If you're wondering why Australia is going backwards, why we're going backwards compared to the rest of the world, why the real incomes in this country have declined over the last few years more than any in our nation's history, go no further than our energy policies and these self-inflicted wounds that we are doing to ourselves with our energy policy and this obsession with renewables. Since around 2007, 2008, when the Rudd government was elected, this mad obsession, all these subsidies of all these wonderful cheap renewables coming into the grid, or so-called cheap renewables, have just pushed electricity prices in this nation higher and higher. Electricity prices in this country have accelerated far faster than the general rate of inflation. And we've lost our competitive advantage in energy. We once used to have a competitive advantage. The low-cost energy in Australia used to be one of the advantages that we had over other nations. But we've surrendered that. As you can see here in this chart, comparing Australian energy prices increases to US energy price increases, you can see how prices in Australia have taken off, while in the USA they've remained relatively stable. We have a situation now where the cost of electricity is double that in Australia than what it is in the USA. How can any of our industries hope to remain competitive if this stays the case? And have a look at the cause of the problem. We've been closing down our coal-fired power stations. Of course, we've seen the big Hazelwood power station closed down in Victoria. We've seen those power stations closed down and blown up over in the renewables paradise of South Australia.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, firing.
Which has delivered South Australia some of the highest electricity prices in the world, not only the highest electricity prices in Australia. And of course, if you look at the forward chart, Australia's left, we've got a fleet of 21 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations left. And that looks like it's going to go down to under 10 gigawatts. We'll reduce our fleet here in Australia to under 10 gigawatts over the next decade, with Eraring, Bayswater and Gladstone power stations closing. When they go, so we'll be down to under 10 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations from the current 21. Now compare that to what China is currently doing. So while we have 21 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations left, burning this beautiful black coal that we have here in Australia, 21 gigawatts left. In China today, they have 1,175 gigawatts. That is the size of the Chinese fleet of coal-fired power stations. And are China planning to close those down like we are here in Australia? If you look at those rough numbers of China's fleet of coal-fired power stations, 1,000 gigawatts of the 1,175 of those coal-fired power stations are less than 19 years of age. So China's fleet, not only is it massively larger than ours, it is much younger than ours. And while we are closing down that 21, China has under development and construction today an extra 421 gigawatts. So they've got over 20 times in construction and development today what we have here in Australia as the size of our total fleet, which we are planning to close down. This is complete economic madness to go down this track. And here's the other thing. China are not slowing down. Last year, they started construction on more coal-fired power stations over the last 10 years than possibly in their history. So if you just look at active construction today, with that extra 100 gigawatts of coal-fired power, China has over 200 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations under active construction in their country, and we've got 21, and we are closing it down, and we think this is going to make some difference to global temperatures. Even if every single nation adopted net zero, by the year 2050, what would be the total decline or the estimated decline of global temperatures if CO2 works like a control knob? Well, the sums have been done, and it's 0.07 of 1 degree. So it is less than 1/10 of 1 degree Celsius that would potentially be averted. I say potentially be averted if every nation went net zero by 2050. We know that's not going to happen because China has said it's not going to happen. And yet Labor, Liberal and the Greens continue to take us down this destructive path. We need a major wake-up call in this country. It is clear whether we adopt the Liberals' policy of renewables plus nuclear or Labor's policy of renewables plus big batteries, or Labor and the Greens' policies and the Teals of renewables plus big batteries, electricity prices in this country are only going to go higher. The only way we can get electricity prices down in this nation is if we call out this nonsense, we call out this madness. And while China, we said, are planning another 421 gigawatts of coal-fired power station to add to their 1,175, in Australia, at least, maybe we could build another 5 or 10 to replace those coal-fired power stations that are going to close down over the next decade. If we don't do that, if we continue on the path that we are going, if we don't have politicians brave enough to stand up in Canberra and say this is a nonsense, we must stop and reverse track, we can't sit around and sell our nation's sovereignty out and watch our competitive advantage be given away while we transfer our assets to communist China and they become richer and we become poorer as they build more and more coal-fired power stations as we close them down. We are going to be a poor, backward, socialist nation that simply can't afford to pay for all the things that we are trying to do with public servants, NDIS, pensions. We're not going to have the income to do that. This is a turning point in the road for our nation. Eventually, we're going to wake up. The question is, how much damage do we do to ourselves in the meantime? So at this next election, I'm asking you, please send a message loud and clear. Put your number one preference for the Libertarian Party. Send a message about this madness. Send a message to Peter Dutton that is not good enough for him to sit there and say, we're going to stay in Paris, when President Trump gave it to Mr. Dutton on a platter that he could have changed tack. We've got China rolling out these coal-fired power stations. We've got the US abandoning Paris targets, abandoning net zero and going drill, baby, drill. Australia is going to be left behind as a nation on this mad, futile, pointless and costly venture, pursuing all this intermittent renewable energy into our grid. Our nation deserves better than what we've got. The data is clear. At this election, there is a third option, and that third option is the Libertarian Party, because we're going to say, end the subsidies, end all the subsidies, exit Paris, quit net zero, and let's get some coal-fired power stations under construction yesterday.